Fast fact. Operating a community shelter is typically estimated to cost between $16,500 and $30,000 per bed annually, depending upon where you live in the country. I'm Drew Thomas, and this is Bank Chats. Yeah, so I'm going to put it on you, and
Okay.
this is how this is going to start today.
All
We are going to start. See, now we're laughing, and then we're going to talk about this heavy topic. So we are going to talk a little bit today about something that we've never really touched on the show, and that is the topic of homelessness.
Yeah.
And how that affects people, obviously from a financial point of view. But there's a lot more that goes into to dealing with this problem than just handing somebody some money and saying, hey, now you're not homeless anymore. Right. So, I'll let you go ahead and, because I feel like I talk all the time, and then I'm just sitting over here vamping. So I'm going to let you introduce our guest, and then we're going to go from there. Yeah.
Thank you. With us today, we have Roxann Tyger, the director of the Women's Help Center and the Community Help Center here in Johnstown, Pennsylvania. You want to tell us a little bit about your programs, your shelters, and yourself?
Yeah, I would love to. Well, I've been at the Women's Help Center for 5 years now.
Mhm.
Actually, this Saturday will be my anniversary, 5 years.
Well,
congrats. Congratulations.
It's flown right by. It's so busy. But yeah, so what we do at the Women's Help Center is we've also created a division called the Community Help Center, because we really have been trying to open up and help everybody who's in need of housing or homelessness services. So having that other division, per se, the Community Help Center makes it much more approachable, I think, for anyone who needs that kind of help. So a wide variety of services, and it's emergency shelter. It is transitional housing for people who are coming out of a homeless situation but aren't quite ready to be independent yet. We have community health workers. We have certified peer specialists. I'm just trying to think of them all in my head that we have. We do a food bank. We do financial literacy, renters education, street outreach, which is something relatively new that we haven't had here in Cambria County before. And eviction prevention. So we do a lot of housing support services too, where we can either help people who are at risk of eviction, they have a notice, or they're behind in their rent. And also once individuals find an apartment or a house to rent, or just need that extra support, we can pay for up to 3 months of rent for them, plus some other services.
Oh, that's
too.
nice. Yeah.
Like moving assistance, transportation assistance.
Well, I can understand why you're here and have all this time to sit and talk with us, because you have nothing else
better
to do.
Yeah,
right?
nothing else to do. I love spending time with you two guys.
No, so I mean, that in and of itself tells you just how involved trying to address this problem can become.
Exactly.
And I know that you said that you have emergency shelter, but that you also have a community outreach, obviously, and community shelter. So how does, I guess the first question is, and if somebody finds themselves in a homeless situation, how does that usually happen? Is it usually because of something like they lost their job and then they can't find another one, or is it something usually that's associated with like maybe an addiction issue or a domestic violence issue, or I'm sure it's a little bit of all of that, but what do you commonly see? Like, how do people usually end up first arriving at your doorstep?
Needing this kind of help. And it really is a lot of those kind of things. So it could be domestic violence. Sometimes it's just a relationship that's dissolved. Maybe a couple living together, someone moves out, the other individual can't afford it on their own, or the individual who has to leave is now homeless. Job loss, hours being cut. So it might not be losing your job, but just not having the hours and enough money to be able to pay the rent. It really has just been a variety of situations. There can be some behavioral health issues, things where people need help and just aren't able to work or maintain they're living at that current level.
Yeah, my daughter, she works with a local school, and she's a what they call a behavioral health or behavioral specialist, and she works with elementary school kids that have sort of like autism and mental challenges and things like that, and a lot of them are on a. I mean, the term spectrum is used a lot, right? But but a lot of them are on a spectrum where they can be. They can have a job, they can hold down certain things, but sometimes they have additional challenges. So like whenever you're saying like it's losing that job, or it's losing the that knife's edge where you're on, where I was making 30 hours a week and I'm just getting by, and now I'm cutting back to 20 hours a week, and now I can't pay my rent, or I can't pay for a car, or I can't. And
so
then
they may not need a lot of help. They're right on that edge of needing assistance where
it doesn't take much to push you.
Yeah,
over
it may be a few
that.
days or weeks or
I remember I worked with a guy that one time he ended up quitting. He was working for us part-time, not here, but he was working for us part-time, and he ended up quitting because it was cheaper for him to stay home with his kids instead of paying for daycare.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So but then all of a sudden, like as your kids get older, well, now I don't have a job, and now I haven't had a job in 10 years, and that becomes an issue. Right. And then if something happens with your spousal relationship or something like that, like you said, they can find yourselves like, well, now, my wife owned the house and now I'm out, or vice versa.
Right.
So what do you typically do? Like, what's the process when someone comes to you and says, okay, I need help? Do you have to do that sort of whole evaluation to see where they are on that spectrum, for lack of a better term?
What are your criteria?
Yeah, what are your criteria to be able to help somebody like that?
Yeah. Well, when someone first comes to us, they can either call in. Sometimes they just walk in because they just need to talk to someone. We do an assessment. It's not very lengthy. It might just be 10, 15 minutes. And for us, it's just trying to understand what they've been doing so far. Sort of what happened. Tell us how you got here. But what are all of your strengths and resources? What are you, do you have a job? Do you need a job? Do you have any income? We really try to look at what their situation is, and also to see, do they have any other resources or supports out there that maybe they haven't tapped into? Do you have family you can stay with? Because a lot of people, you hear the word shelter and it's like, oh my, that's horrible. I don't want to.
Sure, yeah.
And our shelter's not like that. But I would say that's usually just the first thing people think of when they think of a shelter is, a bunkhouse kind of a situation where people are all living together. And although there's some communal aspects to it, it's definitely, a much nicer home-like environment that we try to provide for individuals. But they would come to us, complete that basic information, and we do ask everyone to register on what's called the 211, which is a statewide system. It really is sort of like a system that's run by the United Way that connects people to different resources. So like Jeff, if you're experiencing homelessness or even food insecurity, right? You don't maybe have to know where to call. You can call 211, tell them about your situation. They'll give you resources for where you're at, where you live, for the need that you have. But we do ask everyone to get screened through 211. The system that we use in the state for the homelessness system, it does interact with the 211 system. So that's how you sort of get on our list, so to speak. With the shelter that we have, unfortunately, there is a waiting list. It has been full, for quite some time. So we do ask people to get on the waiting list, and we are constantly checking with individuals on the waiting list to make sure that they have resources, that we're helping the most pressing needs first. Because sometimes people call us, but maybe they are sort of couch surfing, which means they're staying with someone else. It's not their own place. It's not an ideal situation, but they still have a roof over their head. So although they still have a need, if I have a mom with 2 kids who's living in her car, they are at the top of the list, right?
Sure.
So that's someone who's staying in a place that's not fit for habitation. So we're always looking at that to see, who has the highest need, who has the priority to come into shelter. And we also work with people, if for some reason we can't bring them into our shelter, are there other shelters out there who could help them too?
Okay.
So it's not just
you work with like a network of other shelters.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So we do see what other options are out there. But sometimes individuals want to stay in a certain area. Maybe they have a job and it's in Johnstown or somewhere in Cambria County. So going to a shelter in Pittsburgh isn't really going to help their situation. They have some family supports here. So they really don't want to leave. They just need somewhere to stay here until they get back on their feet.
Do you service all of Cambria County, or
We
is
do.
it just specifically? Okay.
Yeah, it's all of Cambria County. And actually, even for individuals to come into shelter, if we're just talking about emergency shelter, they don't have to even be in Cambria County at that moment. So,
Mhm.
yeah, we can help people. Other shelters and other places may have a residency requirement, like you have to be a resident in this area for 3 months or 6 months.
Mhm.
For us, there really is no residency requirement. It's really, we just look at the person in front of us and their need.
So in terms of things like the shelters in a given area, is there any kind of requirement that says, okay, for so much population, there has to be so many shelters to help offset some of the homelessness need? Or is it just, you're a nonprofit, correct?
Correct. Yeah.
So is it just that whoever can stand up enough shelters, or is there government assistance for this? I guess my question is, if I have a population of 20,000, does there have to be a certain amount of shelter available for that population size, as opposed to like Chicago that might have 6 million people and that sort of thing? Does that make sense?
I get your question. Yeah,
Okay.
No, there is no requirement.
Because it's not state run, right?
Well, there's state funding,
Okay.
but there's no requirement that you have to have an emergency shelter. So there are some counties where they don't have a shelter
Okay.
available to them. And really, it's being able to establish what your need is in that county or that city, wherever you are, and being able to approach the state to say, hey, we have a homelessness population of X. We need a shelter. There is no ratio of population to the number of beds you have to have available.
Okay.
So I think in most counties, all of us are just looking to provide as much help and as many beds as we can for the funding that we get.
Yeah.
Okay. So their case has been looked at through the 211, and you've approved them to stay in the shelter. How long is a typical stay, and do they have criteria they have to meet as they're staying there? Like, do they have milestones they have to hit, or else they maybe, not going to say kicked out, but are asked that to leave because they're not making progress?
Okay, great question. Well, a couple of things. So we do have basically 2 types of emergency shelter. So we have I'd say the regular shelter, but we also have one that's our peer-led adult shelter, which would be for individuals with behavioral health. And it actually is the only one in the state of its kind where the staff are also individuals with lived experience with behavioral health. So they're really coming from a place of that lived experience, being able to help someone as a peer versus a case manager who may not have ever had that experience being either homeless or
I'm sure that's
behavioral
really
health.
helpful. Yeah.
So it is. It's someone who's coming from
The same level
where you're
that
at.
you're at,
Yeah,
yeah.
they understand your experience and what you've been through. So we have Cambria House, which is for men, 13 beds, but that is solely behavioral health. So anyone there has to have some kind of behavioral health issue or challenge that they're working through. And all the staff there are certified peer specialists with the state. We do have a few beds at the Women's Help Center for females who are in that same situation with behavioral health, and we have some certified peer specialist staff there. In that program, we go in with a 30-day limit, but it's as long as you're working on your goals and making progress, we can extend that. So we don't tell anyone they can stay indefinitely, but let's say, Drew, if you're there and your 30 days is sort of coming up, we'll meet with you. Well, we meet with you every day.
Okay.
We'll meet when we come close to that 30-day point just to see how much progress you've made. Have you had job interviews? Have you been talking to landlords, trying to find housing? So I see that you're working on it, even if you haven't been able to maybe land that job yet, or you're just on the verge of starting a job, right? So then we'll extend your stay another 30 days. Because we know that 30 days when you're coming to in a situation where you're coming in crisis, so everything, all of your possessions are gone for the most part. You may have a little bit, mentally, that's a severe crisis. That's a traumatic situation that you've been through. So 30 days to find a job, get paid, get enough money for furniture and a security deposit, all those things.
Yeah,
That can
right.
take a few months. That takes time.
Yeah, I think a lot of people forget that too. They say, "Oh, well, go get a job." Okay, well, depending on when I got hired, it might take 3 weeks for me to even
Right.
get a paycheck.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well,
It
no,
doesn't
no.
mean you get a paycheck the
So,
next
like we
day.
had mentioned, you may not even have the documentation. Maybe your spouse shredded your driver's license, your ID, and you can't even get a job.
Right.
you
And
know?
that's not uncommon that
Yeah.
people come to us without their documents. I know we didn't finish the other part about how long they can stay at the Women's Help Center too. But on the document piece, if they do come and they're facing homelessness, we are able to get them a birth certificate replacement for free.
Oh, okay.
So we've got the power to do that. So we
Okay.
can help with that for individuals with their kids, because also if an individual comes with their children to the Women's Help Center, if they're trying to get their kids in school or different programs, they need birth certificates too.
Mhm.
So it's not just a barrier for the parent not having that documentation, but also for the kids to be able to move forward with that.
I mean, you make a you make a point there that Jeff actually found an interesting statistic, which I was shocked by, that in the last school year, there are 12 school districts in Cambria County, and the school district that primarily services the city of Johnstown had the highest rate of homelessness at 5.7%, which is 1 out of 20 students. And you don't really think sometimes about kids being homeless per se. You think about the adult, because your adults are supposed to be taking care of
The responsible one.
and taking care of the
right.
kids and stuff. But, so do you hear, do you sometimes find out that somebody, a parent or a guardian, is homeless through the school district? Like, is it that the kid says, like, hey, I've been showering at grandma's, or or they maybe they're not getting clean clothes, or they're not maintaining, like,
So do you reach out to?
do you reach out
or
then
do you
and
wait
see
for people to come to you with an issue?
Yeah. Well, we do have relationships with the homeless liaisons. The school district has a homeless liaison
Okay.
for the children. So it works both ways. So if we get a family who comes to us and we know that the kids are in school and they're now in the shelter or they're homeless, we'll make that connection with the homeless liaison, because then the kids can then get picked up. It helps to reroute the bus, so they have as little disruption in their lives as possible, so they can get
Okay.
picked up on the bus at the Women's Help Center at the bus stop.
Okay.
So it's not like, because oftentimes people don't have transportation to be able to get the kids to and from school, or whatever school district they're in. Every school district has the homeless liaison. So
Is it
they
like
can
a
help them.
CYS type thing, or is this totally
No,
different?
it's totally different.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But also sometimes too, the school districts will call us if they are concerned about a student, mainly from their end, see if there's a resource on how they can access the shelter for assistance. And I think to the point of that, what I've noticed in maybe the last year and a half or so is that we have been seeing an increase in families seeking shelter. So it's not single individuals; it's moms with kids, or dads with kids, or mom and dad with kids. And also larger families. We're seeing families with 4 or 5 kids. We had a family of 11, recently.
Wow.
So that's something. Even if we have very limited funds that I can use for a hotel room stay. So if I have someone who's in a dire situation, I might be able to pay for a little bit of time, a few days or a week in a hotel. But when you're looking at a family of that size, that's not a hotel room. That's several hotel rooms for a night,
Sure.
which is very expensive.
Now, do local businesses, like local hotels, things like that, do they work with you on things like that? Is it something where they say, all right, like in the banking industry, we are, I don't want to say financially incentivized, but there are things that we have to do to try to give back to our community. And we want to do those things, but there's also, there's regulations around certain financial institutions and what you're supposed to do. Do hotels and other places, do they work with you on stuff like that? Or is it pretty much like, hey, you know what? It's full price if you want to use the hotel. I mean,
Yeah, we've had some hotels who've given us a discount, but right now, no. We pay the regular price that someone else
Yeah.
is paying for that.
I'm sure there's some stigma between homeless, maybe dirty. You don't a hotel may not want homeless people staying in their hotel. So
I guess,
I don't
yeah.
know.
But to your point, though, like you said, like people can end up homeless for a variety of reasons. I mean, now, do you work with people, for example, that maybe, like, God forbid, like had a fire or something like that in their home? Like, can they come to a shelter like yours for like temporary housing, or?
Yeah, and we have helped individuals and families who've been the victims of a fire. I guess on my personal life, I'm a supervisor with the Red Cross,
Okay.
different county, but we do a lot of the disaster response.
Mm.
So I often deal with families, and on that end of things, who are facing fires. That's usually the biggest emergency that we deal with in Pennsylvania as far as the Red Cross or house fires. So I'm often referring them to the local emergency shelters in their area. And again, it really depends on availability of space, because a house fire is something that's immediate that day. You're out.
Yeah.
And you've lost
Yeah.
almost everything, if not everything. So that's, although you're now homeless, but it was a situation where you had absolutely nothing to do with your
Right.
situation there.
Right.
Yeah.
I thought you.
I had a thought, and it was one of those where I keep it in your head while someone's talking, and then as soon as they're done, ask the question, and it's gone. So backtracking a little bit, you had mentioned that if they're coming up on their 30 days, you have more meetings with them to see what their progress is. Have they found a job, or have they sought out an apartment or anything like that? How much do you do versus how much do you make them do? You give them a room and then you give them the resources, or do you help them make the phone calls and set up the interviews and all of that kind of stuff?
Right. You guys are like packed full of great questions today. So that is a great question, because sometimes people may come to us with that expectation that we're going to do all those things for them, right? But part of what we're trying to do is help them regain their independence, right? So the more I do for you, the more you're going to depend on me.
Right.
And we know that this is a temporary situation.
Right.
So if I'm doing things for you in the real world out there, that's not going to happen. So what we do is, especially with our peer specialists, is, we can sit with you while you do things. So we can be there as a support with you. If you have to make a list of phone calls or call your doctor and ask some questions, we can help you prepare for that and make your list and check in with you on that. But we really don't want to be in the position of doing the work for you, because then we're really not helping. It feels like you're helping in that moment, but ultimately you're not really helping.
You're not breaking that cycle that could happen again.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, behind the scenes, we might go on our own and do some research. So if I'm thinking, hey, Jeff, maybe this shelter isn't working out for you, or you need to relocate somewhere. So I'm going to call some of the local shelters and other counties to see who has, what programs and who might have space for you and all that. So I can present you with options. Like,
Okay.
this is what I found. Because I know maybe that would be overwhelming for you to do that. That's a big ask and a lot to do. But, if it's things like, calling your doctor, talking to a landlord, getting ready for a job interview, going to CareerLink. We do use CareerLink a lot, Goodwill. So we look at, for us too, we're not trying to duplicate or replace resources that are out there. We're trying to connect people with the resources that are out there.
So you're a resource center. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And really making that connection, or sometimes even that warm handoff. Like, hey, I can call CareerLink for you and we'll put you on the phone.
Okay.
Yes. I can call and get the call started for you if you're having anxiety about that. The same thing with, it might be going to, we have the Peer Empowerment Center here, or Peer Empowerment Network, that is a drop-in center for people with behavioral health. So we try to connect individuals in our behavioral health program with them, because that's a great support. But sometimes you get a lot of anxiety. I don't think I'm going to know anyone there. I don't know how it works there. I'm unfamiliar. So sometimes the staff will go with them for the first time, just to help introduce them or help them feel comfortable. But we know, again, we don't want them to rely on the staff to go with them. So that's the one time. So we can help you prepare for how to do that.
I would think even, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I would even think working with local, you mentioned Goodwill, which was triggered it in my head. Like, if I'm going to go on a job interview, I need clothes. Right. Sometimes, if I'm homeless, I may not necessarily have a nice shirt and pants and shoes to go on and make a good impression on a person for a job interview or something like that. So, even just putting people in touch with that and maybe being able to supply them with, okay, like, we can get you a blazer, or we can get you a nice top or something like that to try to make a good impression when you're going for things like job interviews and things like that,
Do you
right? I mean,
accept donations that are non-monetary? Like, do you accept donations of
absolutely
clothing and
do.
stuff like that?
Yeah.
Okay.
So hygiene products are always in demand, because when you think about someone who is lower income, they have SNAP benefits or food stamps. It doesn't cover hygiene products and those
Okay.
kind of supplies. So we always try to help people with it.
I've always found that's fascinating. I'm not
You can
fascinating.
buy
I
a
guess,
soda
but
with
it's just,
Snap, but you can't buy a bar of soap.
Can't get a bar of
right.
soap or a
Like,
bottle
how
of
is that?
shampoo.
Yeah.
That's crazy to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So those are always in demand. But we do help. We also accept clothing. Right now, just new clothing, only because it's not because we're snobby and think that we don't want to accept anything secondhand, but just because we have
Christian
so much
Dior
of it.
or nothing.
That's
It's-
right. Coach bags for everyone. But, we have a whole third floor that is packed full of clothing. So we do have a lot. And if someone gives us something that's like used clothing, like we have to launder it.
Uh-huh.
Like there are a lot of resources that people don't really realize they have to go through using that. Whereas if you're giving
Yeah.
me something new, I can just put it where it needs to go
Yeah.
and hang it up. And, a lot of the clients, and sometimes people, if they do give us used clothing, it's in very poor condition. So, that's something that we wouldn't be passing on to someone.
Yeah, I've definitely noticed that too. Like some people think that, oh, well, I'm going to donate my old, clothing or whatever.
Yeah.
But it's got holes in it, and it's got it's like,
Right.
no, this is garbage.
Yeah.
It's you're
Right.
you're just giving it to someone else to throw away.
Just because it's something.
You
Yeah.
know?
Right.
Yeah.
And you just because you think I'm going to donate this to somebody, it's
Yeah.
but I mean, come on, like if you're going to donate something, at least make sure that it's something that somebody's going to want to wear.
Yeah.
It would be the thing.
Because you do want them to feel good about themselves because they're in a
Going through
situation.
a tough time already.
Yeah, they're in through a tough time. So, giving them something that's, even if it's sweatpants, it's a clean pair of sweatpants that are brand new. And
Yeah.
a sweatshirt or, whatever that is. We also take donations of housewares. Those are always a big ticket item for us because when someone is leaving us, we try to at least see what we can help them with to get set up for their new home.
Mhm.
And a lot of times that's the basic kitchen things. When you think about if you
Sure.
had nothing and you moved into an apartment, how would you make dinner? How would you
Mm-hmm.
cook a meal? You need a microwave. You need dishes, glasses, silverware, pots and pans, not just furniture, but you need all those little things that
Mhm.
make it more functional for you.
Do you work with any like donation centers? I know like there's a Cambridge City Mission. They furnish a lot of like the halfway houses in Johnstown. Do you work with any donation centers, or it's just all donations go to the Women's Help Center or Community Help Center?
Yeah. So if we get something that we know that we can't use for some reason, we do reach out to the other organizations
Okay,
like St.
okay.
Vincent de Paul, Goodwill, the Mission to see if they need it, and we can pass that on. We also get people who call us with furniture, and we just don't have much storage.
Mhm.
So for us, although that's great, we love those calls. It might take us a day or two to figure out, do we have any residents or people who've just moved out who could use that? And then you just have the logistics of hooking them up with that,
Okay.
right? So we don't want to necessarily have a space where people bring in their beds and all that. That's
Mhm.
one of my dreams, is to have a furniture store that we can use for that. But because I think that would be fabulous. But right now we just try to make more of that direct connection.
Okay.
Like this person has, a brand new twin bed with a mattress. This person needs it. We do have a van, so we can sometimes help facilitate that and make that happen.
Mhm.
Sometimes the people themselves are willing to go and deliver it and drop it off.
Mhm.
So,
So we talked a good bit so far about just being able to help people get, things like a job or get themselves back on their feet, find a place to live, that sort of thing. But when someone comes to you, and I'm assuming I'm making an assumption here, but I'm assuming you work with people sometimes who end up coming to you with things like substance abuse problems, alcoholism, things like that. Do you help get them into some sort of like a treatment center first? And then maybe they leave you and go to a treatment center, and then that way they can then, like, how does that sort of work? I mean, if someone comes to you, sometimes if they're homeless, it might be because they got into something like that they just couldn't get out of. It could even be something like a gambling addiction or something like that, where they end up losing their livelihood in their house, right? So how does that kind of a thing work if you're in that sort of a situation?
okay. So should say first, we're a low barrier shelter, and people ask what that means. That means that you don't have to be sober to stay with us.
Mhm.
So you can have, or even a completely clean criminal history. There are certain convictions you can't have, like if it's anything with children, or if it's a very violent crime that you've committed, or anything sexual, if you're on the Megan's Law. So as far as using substances, you could come to us still using, but you're not allowed to have any of those things on site. So you can use them off-site as long as your behavior is okay when you come into shelter, that you're not endangering anyone, belligerent, doing anything that's concerning. Staying with us is okay. However, that doesn't mean we're not going to talk to you about getting treatment. Right?
Sure.
So always making sure that we're putting that offer out there. So if you are struggling with substance use, have you thought about treatment? We can work with different treatment providers to get you in. And sometimes that has happened where individuals have taken us up on that offer, which is wonderful. And we will hold the bed for them, because usually that's a concern is, I can't go because then I don't have anywhere to go back to. I'm going to lose my spot here, or I don't have anything. So we can at least take that worry away. We'll hold your bed. You do the 30-day treatment program and then come back to us when that's completed.
So you don't give that bed to the next person in line that's going to stay there 30 days theoretically while that person is in a treatment center for 30 days?
Well, the average length of stay in all of our shelters is about 54 days.
54, okay,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. So even though we say the 30, that's a lot of people need more time than that.
Yeah.
You do have some who maybe they've already had a few things in progress, or they have an apartment lined up in a week or two that they don't need a long stay. But we do hold that bed. It may not be that exact bed, but we sort of hold their space in shelter.
Sure.
Or if we know someone's staying short term, it is like, I hate to say, it's like a card game or shell game where you're like moving this, like this person's leaving, I can do this here, I can do that here.
Yeah, it's like those puzzles that you used to get whenever you were a kid, where you had to move all the pieces to make they're all in there.
Yeah.
But
We're always sliding things around. Like, how
yeah.
can we help this person and still save this so we have a room in 30 days to give them? But I think that's always an enticement. And I think when we're talking to someone in that situation, in a way, it's a good thing when you're in shelter, because it's not like you have to worry about paying your rent. Like, this is actually a good time in your life to get treatment, because you don't have to worry about, how am I going to keep my apartment going? How am I going to take care of all these things? How am I going to pay my bills? Take care of yourself first. Let's get that taken care of, and then we'll work on everything else. Because if you're using, or if you're, even if it's not substances, but just a behavioral health issue, right? Let's get you treatment, because how are you going to get a job and hold a job? How are you going to do all these other things that are necessary to be successful if you're struggling with substance use?
Yeah, and that's, I mean, I think that's a good point to make, is that it's not about criticizing someone's choices or their behaviors per se. We can all stumble on things, and things happen to us, and it's not about that. It's about understanding sometimes that, it's a domino effect, right? It's difficult to do certain things until you address other things first.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Right. Yeah.
So, I think that's an important distinction, that, you shouldn't not seek help from somebody like the Women's Help Center, or the Community Help Center, or anybody else, because you think, well, I'm going to be turned away because I'm in a particular situation, or I'm dealing with substance abuse, or I'm dealing with that. Like, don't not go with that idea. But at the same time, if you really truly want the help, you may have to do certain things you may not necessarily want to do.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Exactly. And it's going to be, uncomfortable in a way to talk about some of those things. But we try to approach it where, like I said before, like, we're dealing with the person who's in front of us. So in a non-judgmental way. So when someone's talking to us, it's not like if you say that you're using a certain substance that we're judging you, or going to tell you that you have to leave.
Right.
But just that we're still going to talk about that, because that is part of your situation and something that's making it more complicated.
Well, I think that's where your peer your peers come into play too. You said that a lot of the employees are actually were in the same situation as these homeless people were at one point. And I think that again makes that easier to maybe talk about.
Right.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think that a lot of people find that it's a lot easier. You understand their situation better, and I feel like I'm more likely to probably talk to somebody who has been in my shoes as opposed to somebody that hasn't, because it's easy to pass judgment on things like that if you've never dealt with it.
Right.
And it may be a little easier for that person to say, okay, well, if you've dealt with this, you kind of know where I'm coming from, you know what I'm feeling, you know what I'm thinking, and it's a good example, quite honestly, that there is maybe an opportunity to move forward.
Yeah, and I think the other thing, I know there was a statistic, and I don't have it at the top of my head, But when we talk about how many Americans have savings that can last them, 1 to 3 months if they lost their job, right? And
it's way fewer than you want it to be.
It's concerning. So if you think about, you're in that situation, if you lose your job today, and maybe you don't have any family nearby or that's a good support to you, right? And the job market, in some aspects, it's we're looking for staff, but a lot of them it's lower paying jobs, right? So let's say you can't get a job for 6 months, you're out of your savings, you're renting, or even if you own a home and you're not able to keep up, like how far away from homelessness are all of us really? When you look at your life situation, or if things were a little bit different for you, you could be in that situation too.
100%. Yeah.
And I think that's where we have that transitional housing program. So as people, our goal isn't to try to keep someone in shelter for a long time, right? But have some other options for them too. So we have 4 properties right now. And it's, I didn't do the math, probably 12 different apartments that we can use. So that as someone maybe they get a job, but they haven't quite saved enough to get furniture, or they really need to get their feet under them a bit more, we can have them go into one of our transitional housing apartments. Some of them are 2 bedrooms. We have 1 bedroom. We have one house where they just have their own bedroom, and there's a few of them sharing a house. But and they're paying something for a living cost to stay there, but it's all furnished. All the utilities are included. They still get case management every week or every other week, and they get food supports from us. So it really is, it's that step to normalcy and independence with still some support. So it's that in between, because we were finding, and I was finding when I first started, is that the goal was to try to get people moved on as quickly as possible. But what if you're not quite ready yet? So Drew, I get you out in 30 days, but you don't really know how to manage your finances, or you didn't have a couch or a bed, or maybe you don't even have some basic life skills like how to cook, or you don't know how to do laundry. You've never had to make a bed before, something like that. How successful are you going to be? And we were seeing people bouncing back into shelter because of that.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't realize I had, if I didn't pay this month, that they were going to kick me out so fast. We hear that sometimes too. And some landlords are more tolerant, or, willing to work with their tenants. Others are not.
Right.
And you just don't know until you find out. Right. So that's when we're thinking more about transitional housing, is wouldn't it be nice to give someone more of a chance to get on their feet? So with this program, they can be in there up to 18 months. They work with, we have a HUD certified housing counselor who's also our housing and resource navigator. So she works with individuals really from the time they even come into shelter to help them find a place. Right? We try to get them into the financial education classes, the renter's education, so they know what to expect, how to be a good tenant so that they don't get evicted. And then we follow them into transitional housing, because if I tell someone, hey, you can stay for up to 18 months, I don't want you to wait until month 17 to start looking for an apartment.
Right.
That's
right.
Yeah, completely fair. Yeah.
Because I'm sort of that way too. Like if you give me a time frame, I know I have that much time.
Yeah.
But I don't want you passing up on an apartment that would be great for you just because you're not looking, or you think you have more time.
Sure.
So we're always working with people and identifying different housing options that are out there that might be a great fit for them. So it's not that we try to force you out, but I think making sure that you know the options, like, hey, this apartment it's in the area you want, it's in your price range, you can afford it. We can help you with all these things. And we have a program where we can help people with the first 3 months rent. We can help them with a U-Haul rental, storage unit, and even transportation. So if you get a job, you finally land that job, but you can't get there, we can get you a bus pass for the first month.
Okay.
So at least that gets you to a paycheck or two so that you can start paying for your bus pass yourself.
Yeah. Do you also help sometimes with things like, I know there are a lot of people that are either underbanked or not banked. And in order to do the basic stuff like pay rent, you kind of have to have be able to write a check, or you have to be able to get, to pay the utility bills. You might have to have a bank account. Like, do you
someplace to direct deposit? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. For your paychecks, a lot of employers simply won't cut you a check.
Right.
They're going to want to
Yeah.
direct deposit. So do you then help people sometimes who have a difficult time with like the banking situation as well?
Yeah, that's part of our financial literacy training that we do. It's 7 parts. We actually have staff who are certified through the Pennsylvania Housing Finance Agency for their Building Your Financial House program. So we teach that model.
Mhm.
And part of it is budgeting, banking, understanding interest and credit and all of those kind of things too. But we do talk to them about getting banked, getting
Yeah.
a bank account. We see a lot of people now who are using just Cash App or those,
Oh yeah.
which is a concern because we've also had people who've been taken advantage of. And, once you pay that money out, there's no getting it back.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
And the other thing that we've seen, not that we've necessarily talked about this, but we've had a few people come through our doors recently who have been scammed as far as apartment rentals.
Yeah.
They find someone on Facebook. We had a couple who they spent every penny that they had for their security deposit, first month's rent, got the U-Haul, put all their belongings in it, came here to that house, and it wasn't available for rent. Like this, it was a complete scam.
Oh geez.
And then they're looking at, well, we don't have a place. We've spent all our money. We have this U-Haul. We can't even afford to keep the U-Haul another day. Where are we going to live? So we were able to help them with a new program. Continue to let them pay for a U-Haul, help them with where they were going to stay, storage unit, and then when they found a place about a month and a half later, help them with the first month's or the security deposit and some of the rent, so they were able to be successful with that.
I think sometimes too, and I think this is an important part of what you guys, it sounds like that you do, is sometimes people just need just a little help.
Right.
You know, I mean, sometimes it's not about providing 18 months necessarily of housing, although for some people it is.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's just, man, if I could just get $1,000 to get me to get that first month's rent in while I'm getting my job, it's just a matter of that little leg up that I think that sometimes some people need, that I don't know, that boost, if you want to look at it that way, maybe, too. And if that's where somebody that's listening to this or watching this happens to be, like, there are people that want to help, 100% want to help, and aren't going to necessarily, judge you harshly for needing that help. I think we all need help from one time or another, that's what a good community does, is tries to help the people within it, to achieve what they need to achieve. Right. So,
Right.
I mean,
You're not just helping the individuals, you're helping the community. Yeah.
We're trying. And I know we can't be everything to everybody. I mean, there are going to be people who come to us and they need maybe some kind of assistance that we can't provide. So we do get calls with people who need utility help. That's not something that we can do.
But you can direct them
But we
to
can
where
direct
they
them.
need to go.
Yeah. But we know, okay, you can call this place. They may have some funds for that.
Yeah.
So it doesn't mean that we have to provide everything. It doesn't mean that, I have to pay for you to live in a hotel for a month. If that's what you want, that doesn't mean that that's something that we can do. But, at least being able to try to, if there's a resource that we have directly, being able to offer that to you and help facilitate you getting that help, or connecting you with a resource outside of us who can help you with that.
Now, on the other side of things, if you're listening to this and you're like, wow, it sounds like she's paying for a lot of things.
It feels that way sometimes, yeah.
As a nonprofit.
And as a nonprofit,
right.
I think maybe she could use some help. How can people, contribute to what you do? Is there a way that they can, do donations? Do you, I know you're a nonprofit, but how do you get your funding?
Right. Well, first of all, we love donations. People can help us all the time with anything. Cash donations are fabulous. We look at, it's probably about, I think, $45 to $50 a day to help keep someone in shelter, because you look at all the different services. It's not about just keeping a roof over their head or paying for the utilities, but food, case management. We're 24/7 at our sites, and that's an expense. So anyone who can, wants to help with those kind of things, they can go to our website, womenshelpcenter.org or communityhelpctrcenter.org, and make a donation. Even just calling us to seeing how you can help. It can be volunteering your time. So even if it's not money, we always need help in some capacity. We've had groups who've come in to help us, maybe with gardening, doing some things outside. We're about ready to start we do a vegetable garden at the Women's Help Center, one of our apartments, and we're going to probably do a little something at Cambria House. because
Okay.
it really, I mean, it's always nice to have fresh veggies and
That
take care
it's
of
a
them
skill
and-
that people can learn, and it's camaraderie, and just
it's a little bit of self-sufficiency. If
Yeah.
you learn how to grow tomatoes, then I don't need
Right.
to buy tomatoes. I can grow my own things. But so those, donations of time, talent, and money are always wonderful. But as far as other funding, we're constantly looking for grants and different opportunities out there
Mm-hmm.
to help with that. So it's just, for us seeing the need, even with our transitional housing program or the rental assistance, that's not something that was just sitting out there. It's like we developed a program and then we went out and tried to find funds to help pay for that
Mm-hmm.
and supplement that. Just because we can see the need and see some funders who might have a fit with us. And then it's just a matter of us trying to go out there and get the money to be able to do that. So even for all of our services, we can't guarantee how long certain funding is going to last. But
Mhm.
that's why we're always looking to see what else we can do and how else we can get that funded.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about the fact that even like you said, when you own a house, like you're still paying a mortgage, right? If you're renting, you're still renting. Like you have overhead. Like, just because you have the building and you have the shelter costs money to operate. The shelter needs electricity. The shelter needs, water. You're providing the food and things like that. Or at least maybe subsidizing some of that, as far as that
And
goes.
maintenance, just keeping them on,
Mm-hmm.
we have a lot of bathrooms. Bathrooms get clogged. Like there's always someone doing plumbing work or electrical work or something that needs either updated or upkeep or some kind of maintenance.
Yeah. I mean, you're big on gardening and things like that, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you're a green thumb.
Yeah, and that's an expensive hobby. Yeah.
It is. If you have a great way to keep like bunnies and groundhogs out of a garden, please let me know because we lost a lot of our
Fences.
stuff. I know we lost a lot of our stuff last year.
Yeah.
But I don't know if we've talked about this yet too, but we're also in the process of building a new shelter
Okay.
in Kernville. So about a block and a half from our current space, only because we were really looking at how the need has grown and changed.
Mhm.
So we purchased a building, able to get some grant funding. If we have anyone out there who has a large sum of money that they don't know what to do with, we would like to have that because we're a little short on our construction budget. But it's going to have room for single men, single women, and then we're also doing some smaller, like 2-bedroom shelter units for families.
Mhm.
And we'll have some staff on site as well, and space for medical providers or different treatment providers to come in.
Okay.
That was another question I had was if you get a family who is in need of shelter, I'm assuming you try to keep them together and there's no, like, you don't have to, put the mother in the Women's Help Center facility and the father and kids or whoever in a different facility, right? We
Try to look
keep
at
them together?
options to keep them together if we can. And that's where some of our transitional housing can come in to
Okay.
play. The problem is, though, you won't be surprised when I say this, it's always full. And there are people waiting
Sure.
to get into that too.
Yeah.
So it's finding that availability of space sometimes.
Okay.
So we may have to look at alternate lodgings for them if, we have the Women's Help Center that's full and Cambria House is also full, like everything's full.
Mhm.
But we do have flow through there. So just because I say it's full today doesn't mean that a room's not opening up. You shouldn't feel like I shouldn't bother calling.
Mhm.
Right.
Because things change seriously day by day.
Well,
at
and you
the
said that
shelter.
you work with other shelters too, so
Correct,
there may be
yeah.
another shelter that has some availability that you can direct them to.
Right. And we triage needs too. So that's why it's important whenever we're talking to someone, we're talking about their other resources that they have. Because just because I don't have a bed for you right now, maybe have you ever asked your cousin Jimmy who,
Yeah,
has a
when
house,
when
can
you're
you
in
stay
that
there for a couple of weeks.
when you're in that panic mode, sometimes just talking through it with someone can be a big help, I'm sure.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think sometimes people make assumptions that oh, well, my cousin doesn't want to help me or my aunt wouldn't take me in or something like that. And
Yeah.
while that might be true, it might not be. A lot of people are far more welcoming and wanting to help than I think we get credit for.
Yeah.
And we tend to think of things in terms of what other people would think of us. But if you asked me, hey, Drew, like if your cousin was in need and needed a place to crash for a week because his house burned down or something happened or his wife kicked him out or something, I would be like, yes, absolutely, I would do that thing.
Yeah.
And I think most people think that way. But when the shoe's on the other foot and they think, well, I have to ask somebody else, they're like, oh, nobody would ever help me.
Yeah, or I don't want to burden them.
Yeah,
embarrassment type
Yeah.
thing too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it certainly never hurts to at least ask, if that's something, because your family, it's not universal, obviously. There are family out there that won't, but most of the time there's somebody in your life that would like to help you. At least somehow, whether it's, a couple of nights on the couch or whatever it might be, right? It's
And even if, like, let's say you do have someone who could help you, but maybe they're out of state and you can't afford to get there. We can possibly help you with that. The one thing that we'll do, though, is we're going to confirm that that's the case, right?
Okay, yeah.
So I'm not just going to pay for a bus ticket to get you to Florida because you might get Florida. Right? I want to know that if I get you there and I get the funds together to get you there, do you have a place to go?
Yeah, sure.
So, we'll call and verify. And
my friend Mickey wants to
that's
have
right. I'm invited to his castle. I just can't seem to get there. Yeah. That's a no. But yeah, if we have family and we can actually call and verify some things, because certainly me being able to help you get there is much better than you trying to, get back on your feet here in a shelter.
Yeah.
If I can get you to where you have some supports, you're probably better off in general
Sure.
than coming or, staying here where you're really just, you're on your own.
Yeah. And frees the bed up for someone else that
Right,
needs
yeah.
it as well. Yeah.
Yeah. This is, I feel like I've learned a lot, and I definitely appreciate you coming in and talking. Is there anything that we didn't touch on that you definitely wanted to make sure that people know about what it's either like to manage an organization like yours, or to take advantage of the services that you may offer?
I think just for people keeping in mind that we are here to help, that we don't judge, and we hope that the stigma of homelessness, that hopefully this helps a bit, that understands that you can understand it can be anybody that's experiencing that. So, if someone thinks of, someone crazy pushing a shopping cart and, dirty, and that's a homeless person, that's not. It's a lot of families. It's a lot of, the person next door, someone you might see every day that you don't know that they're homeless. So, bearing in mind that it could happen to anybody, we're all in this together. I think whatever kind of support you can give to the system is great, whether or not it's our shelter or another shelter or someplace, close to you. I think, we always need help. We always need, financial resources, donations, manpower, talents, whatever people have. That I think the only way we can help to solve the problem is together. Me sitting out here, just trying to shelter people and all of this and helping people, it's great. But I think as a community, we can do a lot more to help people.
Absolutely. And we will put links in the description on this. Yep. And we'll get some from you, things that we can, whether it's to your organization specifically, if you're in our area, if you happen to not be in the area where we live, we can put the 211 information in there. Okay. So we'll make sure that there are some links in the description of this episode to try to help if you need to get more information. Thank you so much for sitting down and talking with us. We really appreciate it.
Touchy topic, I know, but we definitely appreciate it.
Yeah, I know it's not sexy, it's not fun, but I think it is essential. Just the human experience, that we know that that's out there, and people need the help, and people need the information on where to go and how to get the help.
All right. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This podcast focuses on having valuable conversations on various topics related to banking and financial health. The podcast is grounded in having open conversations with professionals and experts, with the goal of helping to take some of the mystery out of financial and related topics, as learning about financial products and services can help you make more informed financial decisions. Please keep in mind that the information contained within this podcast and any resources available for download from our website or other resources relating to Bank Chats is not intended and should not be understood or interpreted to be financial advice. The hosts, guests, and production staff of Bank Chats expressly recommend that you seek advice from a trusted financial professional before making financial decisions. The hosts of Bank Chats are not attorneys, accountants, or financial advisors, and the program is simply intended as one source of information. The podcast is not a substitute for a financial professional who is aware of the facts and circumstances of your individual situation.
We'd all like to believe that becoming homeless only affects a certain type of person, but here are some rather sobering statistics. Only about 1/3 of Americans currently have enough savings to cover 6 months of expenses should they lose their job or become medically unable to work, while 26 to 30% of Americans currently spend more each month than they earn. When you consider those numbers, it's not quite as hard to imagine a situation where you could find yourself underwater very quickly. Add in other statistics concerning domestic abuse and other factors, and suddenly you begin to realize just how vital these organizations are in terms of providing not just a roof overhead, but also safety, specialized care, trauma counseling, housing assistance, and legal aid for people who are trying to rebuild their lives. AmeriServ Presents Bank Chats is produced and distributed by AmeriServ Financial Incorporated. Music by Schneckmind. Our executive producer and co-host is Jeffrey Matevish. We'd love for you to subscribe to the channel, but likes, shares, and comments also help us reach a larger audience, and we appreciate every one. For now, I'm Drew Thomas. So long.